Hello guys, once again I want to welcome you to our class for today, and we are going to continue from where we stopped in our previous class. In our previous class we introduced gymnosperm, we talked about the spermatophyta, and of course remember I said we have two different groups of spermatophyta, the gymnosperm and the angiosperm. Hope you can see the board. Alright, so the gymnosperm and the angiosperm. And we started talking about the gymnosperm. We talked about the characteristics of this group of organisms known as the gymnosperm, and we also look at the classification. We talked about the Genetopsida, Coniferopsida, Genetopsida, Coniferopsida, Sacadopsida, and the different orders were mentioned. You remember we ended the class by mentioning the extinct gymnosperms and the living gymnosperms. You can remember, all the Bennettite tails that were mentioned, the Codite tails, the Pentosilelis, and so on and so forth. Then the living gymnosperm, we talked about the Sacadales, Genetails, Juncos, Coniferous. These are the living gymnosperms. I mean, orders of living gymnosperm. Okay, so there is a little mistake I discovered in the course of talking about the characteristics of gymnosperm. I did mention that water is essential for fertilization, but that is wrong. That is wrong. Water is not essential for fertilization in gymnosperm. The agent of fertilization in gymnosperm is the wind. The wind. So I actually misplaced that. The agent of fertilization in bryophyta is water. In pteridophyta is also water. So I actually misplaced the two. So for gymnosperm, it's not water. For bryophyta is water, for pteridophyta is water, but for gymnosperm it's not water, it's wind. Please note that carefully. Wind is the agent of fertilization. Wind is the agent of fertilization. So in today's class, we want to look at reproduction in gymnosperms, how they reproduce. The reproduction is a bit complex compared to that of pteridophyta, and of course that of angiosperm will also be more complex than that of gymnosperm. All right, so you discover that gymnosperms uh, do not have flowers or do not have complete flowers. Some textbooks you'll be told that gymnosperms do not have flowers at all, that they are categorized as a non-flowering plant. Then in some textbook you'll be told that they do have, but not a complete flower. So let's go with the school of thought that they do not have a complete, a complex flower. And this means that their ovule are born on the two margins of the carpel. And of course, the carpel is the female part of the flower, but the carpel of gymnosperm is devoid of the stigma, the style, and the ovary. The stigma, the style, and the ovary. You can remember pollination, the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. So the first part of the female reproductive part of the flower is called the stigma. Then the style is that tube that connects the stigma with the ovary. So you can't see this. And because you can't see this, remember that the ovule is hidden right inside the ovary. The ovule is hidden right inside the ovary. A minute, let me get my marker. So like I said, the ovule is hidden right inside. So let's assume we'll have this. We'll have this as the female part of the flower. We're going to have something like this. So this is stigma. This first part of the carpel, of course, the female part of the flower is called a carpel, and collection of carpel is called the gynoecium. So this is the stigma, and this is a tube, the style that connects. This is a style that connects the stigma and the ovary. So this is stigma. This is style. Then this is ovary. Then inside this ovary, you see the ovules. The ovules, oh, the ovules are arranged within the ovary in an opposite manner or in an opposite direction. So how many ovules that are found within the ovary? So that is that about gymnosperm. Now, like I said, the ovary houses the ovules. And don't forget that in angiosperms that have ovary, it is that ovary that transforms into a seed, sorry, into a fruit. Then in the case of gymnosperm, it is the ovule that transforms into a seed. The ovule transforms into a seed. This is applicable to both gymnosperm and angiosperm. They both have ovules, and they both have ovules, but the difference is that the ovules of gymnosperm are exposed, but the ovules of angiosperms are not exposed. Why are they not exposed? Because you have all these other components of the female part of the flower that houses the ovule. So you can see the stigma, the style, and the ovary. So the ovule is hidden inside. I'm saying this repeatedly so that you understand this fact. It's very important. Then the drawing you have on the board is the longitudinal section of an ovule. Longitudinal section of an ovule. So if you look at the ovule longitudinally, then this is how it appears. And specifically, this is the ovule of the cycas. The cyca. The cyca is one of the examples of the living gymnosperm. So you have this, you have an opening. This is an opening. This opening, this opening is called the micropyle. So the opening, and don't forget that this is the ovule, but the ovule is covered by a a structure, or it's covered by integument. Let me just specifically mention the name of what covers the ovule. The ovule is covered by integument, and that integument is called the seed coat. Don't forget I said the ovule transforms into a seed. So invariably, the ovule is seen as a seed. So what covers the ovule is called the integument, and another name for integument is the seed coat. And of course, this is the seed coat. The whole of this is the seed coat, which is the integument, and of course, it has the outer layer, the middle layer, and the inner layer. This inner layer is attached with the nucellus, which is the megasporangium. Another name for the nucellus is the megasporangium. So the inner layer of the integument is attached to the nucellus. That's an exam question. You need to note that. Okay. All right. So we can now go further to say that talk about the female prothallus, how it is formed. Now within this nucellus, the whole of this is nucellus, and like I said, if you don't call it nucellus, you can call it the megasporangium. Remember, mega is used for females, the micro is used for males. So we want to see how the megaspore is formed, and by extension, how the female prothallus is formed. So what really happens is that the sperm mother cell, the megaspore mother cell, sorry, megaspore mother cell within this nucellus, megaspore mother cell. The megaspore mother cell within the nucellus, the megaspore mother cell within the nucellus now divides repeatedly to form four megaspores. But out of these four megaspores, we are told that three will disintegrate. It is only one that becomes a functional megaspore. And that functional megaspore, of course, will also divide to now form the female prothallus. The female prothallus. So this is the female prothallus that is formed after the division of the functional megaspore. It now forms this female prothallus. And of course, you should also know from this picture that both the archegonium chamber, as you can see here, and archegonium, we have two archegonia here. So the archegonium chamber, archegonium chamber, and the archegonium itself are housed within the female prothallus, or are part of the female prothallus. Okay, so this is how the female prothallus is formed. Then for that of the male, or the microgametophyte, of course, you know the female prothallus is also called the gametophyte, or the megagametophyte. That's another name for the female prothallus, or the female gametophyte, or megagametophyte. Okay, in the case of the male, this is an opening. This opening is called a micropyle. So wind blows the pollen grain. When wind blows the pollen grain, and like I said, the agent of fertilization in gymnosperm is wind, not water. It's wind, not water. Please note that carefully. I'm repeating it again. The agent of fertilization in gymnosperm is wind, not water. In bryophyta and pteridophyta is water, but in gymnosperm it's wind. A minute. Okay, it's clear. So when wind blows, it kind of carries a pollen grain, and once the pollen grain gets to the micropyle, then it gets bats, or it is battered with uh, the the mucilage that is being released from the micropyle. That is what we call the mucilage. This chemical actually helps to attract the male uh, the male structure, or the male what's it called again? The pollen grain. And I think I mentioned this same chemical in the case of pteridophyta. I said that the archegonia releases the mucilage, or the malic acid, that helps to attract the enterozoite. So in this case now, we're using the pollen grain. Sorry, we're using the pollen grain. So the mucilage bats the pollen grain, and once the mucilage dries up, then the pollen grain is drawn into the pollen chamber. You can see that the first chamber within this oval is the pollen chamber. That's the first chamber within this oval. And within this pollen chamber, you will now see that the pollen grain will now divide into three main different kinds of cells. The first one is a prothallus cell. The prothallus cell. The second one is let me clean the board. So the pollen grain, this pollen grain, the pollen grain, by the time it is drawn within the pollen chamber, it quickly divides into three different types of cell. The prothallus cell, and of course, you know, this prothallus in question is the male prothallus, or the microprothallus, because micro is used for male. Or yes, or the microgametophytes. Sorry, or the microgametophytes. The male prothallus is also called the microgametophytes. Then this is generative cell. Then this is tube cell. Please note this carefully, that this pollen grain, like I said, by the time it is drawn from the micropyle, this micropyle, the opening of the oval is called the micropyle. So once it is drawn here, then the pollen grain now divides into the prothallus cell, the generative cell, and the tube cell. So the generative cell will now divide into two other cells, the stalk cell and the body cell. The stalk cell is sterile, whereas the body cell will not divide to form two different spermatozoids, or two different sperms, or two different gametes, two different gametes or spermatozoids or sperms, whereas the tube cell will now transform, will elongate and transform into the pollen tube. And this pollen tube, uh, once it forms this pollen tube, remember all this has happened within the pollen chamber. But once the pollen tube is formed, the pollen tube elongates and enters, the pollen tube will now elongate and now enters the archegonial chamber. What is it looking for in archegonial chamber? The egg. It breaks through the archegonial chamber and, of course, gets into this archegonia. Don't forget that the egg cell is located within the archegonia. So once it breaks through the archegonal chamber, then of course it gains access to this archegonium, and by extension the eggs or the egg within the archegonium. Remember, I already said that the generative cell will divide into stalk cell and body cell. The stalk cell is sterile, will soon degenerate. Then the body cell now forms the two spermatozoids, or the two male gametes, all these things are still within the pollen tube, so that by the time the pollen tube breaks through into this archegonia and gets into the egg within the archegonium, then the nucleus of the male gamete, a kind of uncoats. That means that the cytoplasmic shield is removed and the nucleus of the male gamete fertilizes the egg nucleus. And once it fertilizes the egg nucleus within this archegonium, then a zygote is formed. So this is the process of fertilization in gymnosperm, with emphasis on cycas. 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 Cyca is an example of cyca there. All right. So I hope this is well understood. I hope this is well understood. Then I'll just read few other things before we go into another thing. The egg nucleus undergoes, that is after fertilization, and the egg nucleus undergoes free nuclear divisions for 8 or 10 times after fertilization. Following divisions, a large number of free nuclei. Okay, let me just forget about that. Then coming to the seed, the ovule grows into the seed after fertilization, which I've mentioned before. And the seed is ovoid in shape and usually orange or red color. The mature seed contains only one embryo and is differentiated into hypocotyl, radical, plumule, and two cotyledons. The cotyledons are embedded in the endosperm and derive food from there. So this is about, but let me also use, even though it's the same thing, I can now use a structure to represent this in form of life cycle. Let me represent what I've explained in form of life cycle. Okay, so we'll have the life cycle of gymnosperm. So this is the plant itself, the gymnosperm plant. Then this is seed cone. Then seed cone. This is pollen cone. This is pollen cone. Just a minute. let me get something clearly. So this is the plant, the pollen cone, the pollen cone. Remember we said that gymnosperms have cone. Hmm? They have cone. They have cone, and we have two different types of cone. We have the one that bears the female part, and the one that bears the male part. So the male part of the cone is called the pollen cone. The female part of the cone is called the seed cone. So you have the microsporangium and the megasporangium. This microsporangium, the pollen sac, the pollen sac, also called the microsporangium. Then, of course, we'll have the megasporangium, which is also called the embryo sac. So this results to the microspore mother cell, and of course, we have always mentioned this microspore mother cell, the microspore mother cell, and the megaspore mother cell. So this will now birth the microspore. The megaspore mother cell will now produce the megaspore. The microspore develops into the male gametophyte. If you can remember, if you can remember, when I drew that diagram, I explained this. The microspore is also called the pollen grain. Note this: the microspore is also called the pollen grain. So it is a microspore, like we explained, when it is drawn with the help of the mucilage into the pollen chamber that divides into the generative cell, into the prothallus, which is the male gametophyte. You can see, you can see microspore resulting to male gametophyte. So it's a part of that thing I explained. The pollen grain. So let me write it here. This microspore is also called a pollen grain. It's also called a pollen grain. So the pollen grain or the microspore divides into the small male prothallus or male gametophyte, generative cell, and the tube cell. The tube cell, like I said, transforms into a, a, a what's it called again? Pollen tube, yes. The tube cell transforms to a pollen tube that breaks through the archegonial chamber and the archegonium by extension, where it gains access to the egg for fertilization. But then, I also said that a generative cell divides into a stalk cell and the body cell. The stalk cell is sterile. The body cell now divides further to birth two male gametophytes, and that is where you can see sperm here. You can see sperm here because this sperm was formed from the generative cell. Then coming to the female. Remember I said that the nucellus or the megasporangium produces four megaspores, four rows of megaspores. Then out of these four megaspores, three degenerate, then one becomes functional. That one that becomes functional also undergoes uh, divisions to form the female prothallus. You can see that from megaspore to female prothallus. You can see that megaspore to female prothallus. And don't also forget that I said the megaspores are produced within the nucellus, and the nucellus is also called the megasporangium. You can see the megasporangium here, the megasporangium, which is born on the seed cone, the female part of the cone. The megasporangium is born on the female part of the cone. This is a megasporangium. And inside the nucellus or the megasporangium, you have the sperm mother cell, and I mentioned it, that produces the four spores. Then, of course, I also did mention that the nucleus, the nucleus on sheets, that means the cytoplasmic sheet is removed so that the nucleus swims into of course is ciliated. The male gametophyte of gymnosperm is ciliated, and it is uh, once the cytoplasmic sheet is removed, then the nucleus migrates into the egg nucleus where it fertilizes the egg. And of course, after fertilization, a zygote is formed. This zygote is also called the oospore. Then, what again? The zygote transforms to an embryo, and the embryo into the plant, and the cycle continues. All the stages, as you have always known, all the stages from the microspore to the gametes are the gametophytes. The gametophytes with n number of chromosomes. Then all the stages here is the what? The sporophyte with two n number of chromosomes. Minutes. All right. So this is how far we can go with respect to the life cycle of gymnosperm. We're going to look at other aspects of gymnosperm. Let's look at other aspects of gymnosperm we don't mention. I know I've talked about pteridosperm, the seed fence. All right, let me just go through some extinct members of gymnosperm and a few other things on the living members of gymnosperm. I will see how far we can go from there. So one of the extinct gymnosperms we mentioned is Benetites under the other Benetite tails. And it is said here that since the Paleozoic era was characterized by ferns and seed fern, the Paleozoic era was characterized by ferns and seed fern. That means that you you would likely find uh, the fern and seed fern within the Paleozoic era. That was when they thrived. But when it comes to uh, the gymnosperm thrived within the Cenozoic era. The gymnosperms thrived, within the Mesozoic era, and angiosperms within the Cenozoic era. All these era are important. You note them. Let me write them down. So fern is pteridophyta. Seed fern, this is pteridophyta. The seed fern is pteridosperm. Pteridosperm. Seed fern is what? Pteridosperm. So these two thrived within the Paleozoic era. Then gymnosperm thrived within the Mesozoic era. Then angiosperm thrived within the Cenozoic. That's correct. Cenozoic era. So Benetates then was conspicuous among these early gymnosperms, and the seed ferns are the ancestral stock from which Benetates arose. So these seed fern, the pteridosperm, are the ancestral stock from which Benetates arose. Then we have the chordates. They say that these chordates were comparable to modern conifers. Of course, you know that chordates are also part of the extinct gymnosperm. They are part of the extinct gymnosperm, the chordates. Chordates. They are one of the extinct gymnosperms. But we are now told that they are comparable to modern conifers. Of course, you know that conifers are examples of living gymnosperms that fall under coniferous. They had tall trunks and usually branch only at the top. The branches are borne numerous simple, thick, and leathery leaves. Okay, let's now go to living gymnosperms. Under living gymnosperms, we have the cycadales. Members of cycadales are a small group of 9 living genera and about 100 species of them. You find them you can find cycadales within the eastern and the western hemispheres. Even though their fossils are not too common. The stem of cyca is stout unbranched with a terminal crown of long, leathery compound leaves. The plants are palm-like in appearance. If you look at cycadale, it looks like a palm tree or a palm. A palm looks like a palm. The way you see the leaves of a palm tree, that is how the cycadales look like. If you're not careful, you think that they are even palm trees. So, like I said, they are palm-like in appearance. In some species, the stem is stout and tuber-like, while in others, it is columnar. Sorry. Certain cycas have been known to attain a height of 9 meters, but most are usually do not exceed 1.8 meters. So, while some are as tall as 9 meters, some do not exceed 1.8 meters. Cycas are dioecious, bearing the male and female flowers on 2 separate plants. Yes, when you say that a plant is dioecious, that means that the male and the female sex organs are usually separated. There is no proper flower in cycas. The plant bears it. Okay, I think I've gone through this. I've gone through the fertilization. So this is a pollen tube I was talking about. This is a pollen tube that is usually formed. Then this is a body cell divided into two uh, spermatozoids. Two spermatozoids. Then another important gymnosperm is the gingos. Gingos. This gingos is in the order ginkgos. Ginkgos. A, a living example. Remember, we are trying to briefly look at some of the gymnosperms that we have. Gingos. So, we discover that uh, this gingos is an order of a living gymnosperm. It has a single living representative, a single living species, and that single living species is Ginkgo biloba. And we are told that this gymnosperm is a native of China, and that is where it is usually cultivated and commonly found. It has a leaf, a broad leaf that looks like a fan. That looks like a fan, and it is a large tree that reaches the height of more than 30 meters. It is a very long tree. The tree of Ginkgo biloba, is very long. And Ginkgo, some people call it Jinkuko. The biological terms are something else. So Ginkgo is also dioecious. Just like we said that cycas are also dioecious. That means that the male and the female structures are born on separate cones. They are dioecious. Then the male strobilus is made up of paired microsporangia. Okay, let's forget about that. Look at the leaves. The leaves of ginkgo, it looks like a fan with a depression at the middle. Then coniferous. Don't forget that when I mentioned coniferous initially, I thought about the fact that coniferous have the family Abiataceae, and that's the largest family in the whole of gymnosperm. And that means that by extension that coniferous are the largest order in gymnosperm. And they have many examples of gymnosperm under coniferous. So let's look at one or two things. And it says this order contains numerous living species, mainly from extensive forests in both the northern and southern hemispheres. The conifers, like other gymnosperms, are very ancient. Yes, like we said, they are very ancient, extending back into the upper Carboniferous era or times. This is about 286 million years ago, Carboniferous era. They have two extant examples, and it's important you note them. There are two extant examples of the conifers. It's important you note these two extant examples. The first one is called monkey puzzle tree. Monkey puzzle tree. Then Norfolk Island pine. Monkey puzzle tree, and Norfolk Island pine. These are the two examples or two members of extinct conifers. So that means that in coniferous you have both living and extinct. Coniferous are the cone-bearing plants. Of course, all gymnosperms are cone-bearing plants and are characterized by the production of cone-like strobili. These are two kinds. There are two kinds of cones: the seed cones and the ovulate cone. The seed cones, when young, are called ovulate cone. Note this, that the seed cone, when they are still young, are called the ovulate cone. The ovulate cone. The examples of conifers, let me just list some of the examples of conifers which are important to note. Remember, I said monkey puzzle tree and the Norfolk Island pine are the extinct coniferous. So examples, we have the pine, we have the spruce, we have the fir, we have hemlock. What again? We have Douglas, we have cedar. I know you would have heard cedar in Lebanon. Cedar. So cedar. These are the examples of coniferous and also examples of gymnosperm. The pine, the spruce, the fir, hemlock, and Douglas, cedar. Okay, I just want us to finish up everything about gymnosperm today. This reproduction in pine is also a repetition of the reproduction in cycas. They are basically the same thing, almost the same thing. Okay, then what we'll now look at, we'll look at the importance of conifers. Conifers are important in nature and in man's economy. One, forests of coniferous trees in many parts of the world are effective in checking soil erosion. So the trees of conifers can be used to check erosion. They provide shelter and edible seeds for many wild animals. This is also another importance of conifers. The world's important softwoods such as pine, cedar, redwood, spruce, fire, and Douglas fir are products of coniferous species. So they are used in as they are used in furniture, and they produce wood. They use to produce wood that is of course used in furniture. The woods of conifers are valuable in construction work, just like I just mentioned, and in manufacture of pulp. Distillation of woods of conifers give rise to wood gas, wood tar, wood alcohol, and other industrially valuable products. So the industrial distillation of woods of conifers will get wood gas, wood tar, the wood alcohol, and the rest. Then aromatic compounds such as oil of cedar and oil of pine, the turpentine, are important ingredients in medicine, in paint, incense, and perfumes. So you can see that pine, uh, or gymnosperm, conifer, sorry, or gymnosperm by extension, is used in the production of both perfumes, incense, uh, paints, and medicine. The resins from conifers are valuable in varnishes and paints. Okay, the hemlock bark is an important source of tannins. The tannin you know about, you can use hemlock. Hemlock is one example of gymnosperm. Then the seeds of some pines are eaten by human beings. Okay, amber used in jewelry. So we have your gymnosperm that is also used in jewelry. It's called amber. All right, so go to the last group of gymnosperm, which is the genitals. The genitals. A minute. The genitals. All right. When I thought about genitals initially, this is still gymnosperm we're talking about. Gymnosperm. So the first time I thought about genitals, I said that genitals are the most advanced group of gymnosperms are called the genitals, and this order has three families. If you can remember, I have Genetaceae, Ephridaceae, and Wawishacea. Genetaceae Now giving example genetum, welwitschia, and ephedra. So what we're going to do now is to see uh, because genetals are the most advanced group of gymnosperm, you're going to discover that these genetals have some characteristics of angiosperms. You know that gymnosperms are more primitive than angiosperms. Angiosperms are more advanced. That means that gymnosperms evolved before angiosperms. So the last group of gymnosperm that evolved, which is now said to be the most advanced group, will of course have some similarities with angiosperms. And because it is still under gymnosperm, of course, it will also have some characteristics of gymnosperms. So we want to look at the gymnospermic characteristics of genetum. Then we also look at angiospermic characteristics of genetum. Then we'll round off by looking at the similarities between gymnosperms and angiosperms. And possibly in our next class, we'll now begin to talk about angiosperm as the last and the most advanced group of plants. All right, so gymnospermic characteristics of genetum. Number one, ovules are not enclosed within an ovary, and I've explained this. In the same, just the way the ovules of gymnosperms are not, other gymnosperms are not enclosed in ovary, that of genetum is also not enclosed in ovary. So this is a gymnospermic characteristics of genetum. Then another one, the pollen grains are lodged directly on the ovule, and I've explained this. Since the carpel does not have stigma, does not have style, does not have ovary, the ovules are exposed. The ovules are exposed and are born on the two margins of the carpel. So the pollen grain, once it comes, it lands directly on the ovule, does not pass through the stigma, style, and ovary. The male and female strobili of gymnospermic characteristics, strobili, that is the sporangiferous spike. They will have possession of tracheae with bordered pit. The vascular bundles are in successive concentric rings as in cycles. The generative cell divides to, okay, we also mentioned the generative cell divides to produce the two male gametes into stalk cell and body cell. Stalk cell being sterile and body cell that produces the two male gametes. Then let's now look at the resemblances of gymnosperm with angiosperm. Like I've said, since genetum is the most advanced group of gymnosperm, that means is somehow related to angiosperm, because it's just like you have two countries. You have Mexico, you have the United States. Then those that are staying within the boundary of United States and Mexico will of course have some similarities in terms of culture, in terms of way, because they mingle. I'm just using this as an example. I actually don't know how it works there, but I'm just trying to say that individuals within the borderline will of course have some link with the other individuals from the other group. So this is what happens in the case of gymnosperm. So the fact that they're the most advanced group makes them to have some similarities with the next group of plants, which is the angiosperm. So we want to look at those similarities a minute. This is 40, okay. Don't listen to, we're almost done. So the other one is a resemblance of genetum with angiosperm. Number one, genetum resembles angiosperm in vegetative, anatomical, and reproductive features. Okay, number one, genetum possess broad leaves with decent reticulate venation that are similar to those of angiosperm. Yes, broad leaves are majorly found in angiosperm and is similar to what genetum have. Then genetum has a climbing habit that resembles those of angiosperm. Yes, the genetum possess true vessels in secondary wood, and these are of angiospermic type. Let me dwell on this a little. If you can remember when I talked about the characteristics of gymnosperm, I said that the xylem of gymnosperm is not as complex as that of the angiosperm. In a typical xylem, you see the trachees and you see the vessel. But the xylem of gymnosperm lacks vessel, but it consists of tracheids. So that's what we are saying in this case. Genetum, hmm, genetum is related to angiosperm in this case. Sorry. In the sense that genetum does not lack vessel, just like other gymnosperm, but it contains vessel. You can see that these are characteristics of angiosperm. Other gymnosperms do not have vessel in their wood or in their xylem, but genetum has vessel and of course tracheids. Both male and female flowers of genetum possess parent. When we talk about parent talks about the carpel and the sepal. Parent talks about the carpel and sepal. Carpel and sepal are called parents. So it says both male and female flowers of genetum possess parent as in angiosperm. So the flower-like structure in genetum has both the the carpel and the petal, which collectively are called parents. The ovule of genetum is surrounded by two integuments. This is very important. Remember we mentioned the integument or the seed coat in gymnosperm, and that seed coat is what covers the ovary. So in angiosperm, you also see seed coat, but these seed coats or integuments are two, unlike in the case of gymnosperm, that is one. The archegonia are absent in both genetum and angiosperm. Yes, by the time we get to angiosperm, you will never hear me mention archegonia because they have a full functional female reproductive structure. So the female part of the flower, a full functional female part of the flower. So there is no need of archegonia. So archegonia is absent. Archegonia are absent because it's plural. Archegonia are absent in genetum, just like they are absent in angiosperm. Then another one is that in genetum, the female gametophyte with many free nuclei has a resemblance to the embryo sac of the angiosperm. Okay. The stamen of genetum resemble that of an angiosperm. The stamen of genetum resemble that of an angiosperm. That is correct. The stamen is the male part of the flower. So it's saying that the stamen of genetum is similar to that of angiosperm. The endosperm is formed after fertilization as an angiosperm. This is very important. In gymnosperm, the endosperm is formed before fertilization, but in angiosperm, the endosperm is formed after fertilization. The embryo of both genetum and the angiosperm possess two cotyledons. Yeah, this is also important. Two cotyledons are found between are found uh, in the embryo of both genetum and angiosperm. Then the last, before we say bye-bye to gymnosperm, similarity between gymnosperms and angiosperms. We have looked at the differences between gymnosperms and angiosperms. We want to now look at the similarities between them. Number one, the plant is differentiated into roots and shoots, of course. I can say into three vegetative parts of the body: the leaves, the stem, and the roots. Yes, they are clearly differentiated. They are main plants. Number two, both possess well-developed vascular system. Yes, both gymnosperm and angiosperm, they possess well-developed vascular system, even though some cells are lacking, like I said, in some members of gymnosperm. Then in both, microspore or pollen grain grows into pollen tube that carries the male gametophyte to the position close to the egg for fertilization. In both, microspore or pollen grain, I think I mentioned it before, grows into a pollen tube that carries the male gametophyte into a place within the female part where it fertilizes the egg. The megasporangium is enclosed by the integument for better protection of the embryo. The megasporangium is enclosed by the integument. Yes, the megasporangium is also called the nucellus. And from the structure I drew initially, you see that, or you would have seen it clearly, that the integument covers the megasporangium or the nucellus. The young sporophyte makes use of food stored by the parent sporophyte during development. Yes, the young sporophyte makes use of the food stored by the parents sporophyte during development. This is true for both gymnosperm and angiosperm. The megaspore is enclosed in the megasporangium, and this germinates into female gametophyte within the sporangium, megasporangium. So let me repeat again. The megaspore is enclosed in the megasporangium. The megaspore is enclosed with the megasporangium, which is also called the nucellus, and this germinates into female gametophyte within the megasporangium. I've mentioned this before, that within the nucellus of the megasporangium, four megaspores are formed, three disintegrate, then one functional one now also divides to form the functional female protalus or the female gametophyte. So differences between angiosperms and gymnosperms. Number one, the reproductive structures of angiosperms are flowers, whereas that of gymnosperms are cones. The reproductive structures of angiosperms are flowers, that of gymnosperms are cones. A minute. Okay, it's almost 1 hour. I'll be rounding off now. In angiosperms, seeds are enclosed by carpels. A mature carpel is a fruit. Don't forget that a mature carpel is a fruit. Then in gymnosperms, seeds are not enclosed but borne on surfaces of cone. I've mentioned that. Angiosperms show double fertilization. We're going to look at that. By the time we get to angiosperm, there's what we call double fertilization. Two gametes, male gametes, are also produced in angiosperm. One fertilizes the egg cell to form a zygote. Then the other one fertilizes what we call the polar nuclei to form triploid endosperm. We're going to look at that. This is called double fertilization. So double fertilization occurs in angiosperm, but single fertilization occurs in gymnosperm. So in gymnosperm, only single, okay. The endosperm of angiosperm is triploid, and it originates in the fusion of one sperm nucleus with two polar nuclei. This is just what I just explained. The endosperm of angiosperm is triploid, and that of gymnosperm is diploid. Okay, so the endosperm, okay, use of the gymnosperm seeds, the embryo utilizes the haploid megagametophyte. Okay, in gymnosperm, pollen grains do not reach the ovules directly, but land on the apex of the stigma. The pollen tube then goes downward through the tissue of the stigma cell. So this is just explaining what I've explained before. In angiosperms, the pollen grains do not land directly on the ovule. It first of all lands on the style, then develops a pollen tube that takes it down to the female part, where the egg is located. But for gymnosperm, it lands directly on the exposed ovules. Okay. The xylem of most angiosperms has vessels, whereas the xylem of most gymnosperms lack vessels. Yes, the xylem of most angiosperms, whether yeah, I've explained that. The xylem of angiosperm, majority of them, they have vessels, they have trachees, but that of gymnosperms lacks this uh, vessel, even though they have trachees. Cotyledons are 2 to 15 in gymnosperm, the 1 to 2 in angiosperm, yes. Why we have 2 to 15 number of cotyledons in gymnosperms, that of angiosperms are very reduced, which is about 1 to 2. Pollination agents in gymnosperm are air currents or wind, whereas in angiosperm there are many different pollinating agents. So in angiosperm we have many pollinating agents, both wind, animals, insects, and the rest of them. But in gymnosperm, wind is the pollinating agent or the agent of pollination. The flowers are much simpler in gymnosperm. No calyx, no corolla. The flowers are always unisexual, consisting of either microsporophyll or megasporophyll. Just like I said, in some quarters, some people of the school of thought that gymnosperms do not have flowers at all. But here we are seeing that gymnosperms flowers are simpler. Flowers are simpler in gymnosperms. Okay, if they have flower-like structure, the flower-like structure in gymnosperms are simpler, but you have a full-fledged flower in the case of angiosperm. Then lastly, sieve tube members and companion cells are usually found in angiosperm phloem. Sieve tube members are structurally less specialized in gymnosperm, and companion cells are lacking. So you see a less specialized sieve tube members in the case of gymnosperm. That of angiosperm is more sophisticated. Then of course you will not see companion cells at all. I mentioned that the companion cells are not found in gymnosperm. They have a group of cells they call the albuminous cells. Albuminous cell that functions like the companion cells in angiosperm. So gymnosperm don't have companion cells. Companion cells are found in angiosperm. And I also explained the function of companion cells. They help in loading and unloading of sugar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how far we can go in the study of gymnosperm. So we are going to end here. We're going to end the class here for today. In our next class, we'll now look at angiosperms holistically. We'll have so many other things to talk about in angiosperm. So continue to tune in to this page on YouTube and share the video as much as you can. See you in my next class.